Self-esteem, how we value and perceive ourselves, our belief in our abilities and our self-worth is something you see in every age group, from adults, senior citizens, and for the purpose of our talk today, certainly with school-age children. When you look at self-esteem, you can kind of break it down into three types of levels, where you have healthy self-esteem, where someone has an accurate and balanced view, and they really accept and value who they are, which is certainly the goal of every child. You want them to feel good about themselves. You have excessive or inflated self-esteem, where it's maybe a little bit too high, almost an arrogance in terms of how one perceives himself. And that's probably a talk for another day, certainly something that needs to be worked on. And then finally, low self-esteem, that feeling of inadequacy, a negative view of one's own ability, one's own self-worth, which is certainly concerning and certainly something that as a school and as a teacher and as a parent, you want to help a student or help your child to improve upon. Now, I think it's important as we look at self-esteem to distinguish the difference between confidence and self-esteem. While they're closely related, confidence is more of a very specific thing, where maybe you don't feel as good about yourself in a specific ability or skill, whereas your self-esteem is that overall view of yourself. And I'll talk about, for example, in a basketball game, maybe somebody's an excellent overall player, but there might be that one skill they are not as confident in. If it's a point guard and he's a great ball handler and he can distribute the ball and he can drive to the hoop and make layups, he has high confidence in those areas. However, he may really struggle as an outside shooter. So his confidence in that specific skill is lower, but his overall self-esteem of himself as an overall basketball player is still pretty high. So there is a slight difference between the two. And I think it's important to distinguish that as we continue with our talk today. So good morning, Gary. It's good to see you.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you too.
Absolutely. So kind of following up what I just talked about with self-esteem, when does someone's self-esteem really become a real concern?
Well, Mike, everybody experiences anxiety at some point in time, or the fear of succeeding in trying something new, or even when meeting someone new. When someone has low self-esteem, they think negatively about their abilities and their worth. And the more this happens, the less happy they feel about themselves. Now, instead of feeling comfortable or confident, they become less likely to engage or compete. Once these feelings of, which I said, normal doubt or anxiety begin to affect the child on a consistent basis, either academically, socially, or emotionally, it's now becoming a problem.
Right. So it's basically when these things are affecting their everyday life with friendships, with family relationships, with teacher relationships, that's when you have to worry.
Absolutely.
So speaking about parents, and again, we all have some moments where we're not as confident in certain areas and maybe have more confidence in other areas. What are some things that parents should be looking for when they should be like, hey, my child may have low self-esteem? What are some things they should be looking for in reference to that?
Well, there's several things you look at. You don't look at any one specific item in isolation, because that could mean a number of different things. It could just be a bad day. It could be something that's going on that upset the child. So you have to look at a number of different situations, and also not just happening in a one-off situation, but over a certain amount of frequency as well. And these kinds of things you look for are with children who are consistently comparing themselves to other children. I'm not as strong. I'm not as smart. This is one thing that often happens. Sometimes kids make disparaging remarks, such as, I'm stupid, or nobody likes me. It could be the avoidance or reluctance to try new things, or the continual fear of failure, giving up too easily, not willing to persevere, getting easily frustrated. Sometimes children become people pleasers. They will laugh at the jokes of another child, even if they don't think they're funny, just to curry favor with that particular child. And we've seen situations where kids will give toys to other children that they've brought from home, or even money, just to get kids to like them. So you'll see that too. You sometimes will see kids who blame themselves for things, even though it's not their fault. And there are kids, believe it or not, who are the class clowns or bullies or act as if they don't care, who actually are demonstrating low self-esteem through those actions.
Because they can't find their self-esteem someplace else. So they're saying, hey, if I act like a clown or act like a bully, at least I'm getting attention that way. It makes me feel somewhat better about myself.
Right. And people are laughing at me, and exactly, negative attention is better than no attention.
Right.
And also sometimes, for example, if they're struggling academically, it masks that fact. No one notices that. They notice how cool they are or whatever it is that they're doing. And then you get kids who are doing well initially, but with the passages of time, they start to underperform. So these are just, again, some things that you can look out for as a parent.
Right. So parents will be looking for these things. And as they're observing these certain behaviors and they're saying, hey, they talk to each other and man, our kid may have some self-esteem issues. One of the next logical points of thinking may be why? What has caused this low self-esteem? What has triggered this?
Correct. There's several things, and sometimes it's not even intentional, it's inadvertent, but there's ongoing criticism from authority figures, which could be the school and or the parents. And children are looking to, particularly parents, to be proud of them and think how wonderful they are. And they even look to this acceptance from teachers and authority figures. And when it's not coming and it's just continual criticism, whether it's through comparing to other children or siblings or even to themselves, this starts to impact the child. And again, parents sometimes are doing this with good intentions, but nonetheless, it starts to impact the child. Sometimes there are direct academic struggles. Right. And from this, the child sees they're not learning and compares themselves to other children and starts to develop low self-esteem. Sometimes it's social. There are children who struggle socially, struggle with making friends. And at this particular age, it's huge to be able to be in social groups and have friendships. And when that's not happening, it becomes a struggle for the child. But it's not just for kids who don't have the social skills. It could be a child who moves to a new community, and in the new school, there are cliques or groups, and they're not automatically accepted into those. So it can happen to any child, not just a child that has trouble socially. Sometimes it could come through changes at home. It could be parents who are fighting, a potential divorce. It could be moving to a new neighborhood. It could be the finances of a home are changing. All these things can impact a child. Being bullied, that's a big one. And we know it's quite prevalent nowadays in talks and society. Being bullied has an impact on a child and their self-esteem and affects everything that they're then doing. And one of the biggest ones, and this is with the advent of technology and the improvement of social media, is trying to keep up with everything that's going on out there, even if it's not real. Having the perfect body, being the perfect athlete, performing at the highest levels. They are being compared to, as I said, things that are not, or people that are not even real.
Right.
And trying to compete and cope with that is very, very difficult for them, and it has a huge impact on their self-esteem. So again, these are just some of the things that cause the low self-esteem.
And I think too, it's important to realize that sometimes, I mean, those are 5 or 6 great points, that in some cases it may be one of those, and it happens a lot, and maybe a parent can identify that. But sometimes it may be a little of a lot of things. Maybe it's a little bit of social media. Maybe it's a little bit of the academic struggles. Maybe it's they do well in math and English, but they struggle in science. And it's all of a sudden this combination of all these things that, hey, my child has low self-esteem.
Absolutely.
So almost sneak up on a parent. So if they have developed this low self-esteem, as a parent, obviously you're concerned, but not just for the present, but also for the future. So if it's not addressed, how can these low self-esteem issues, how can it manifest? What are these long-term effects?
Well, short-term, it begins to affect and impacts a child's academic, social, and emotional progress. And as it manifests itself and becomes more problematic, these kids become more susceptible to substance abuse, overeating, self-harm. And both short and long term, it can lead to feelings of self-doubt, feelings of inadequacy, stress, anxiety, depression, definitely making friends, keeping friends, choosing the correct choices in friends. Making the correct choices in friends. And as they go on, this begins to impact relationships, marriages, career advancement. So it really becomes an exponential difficulty or problem as time goes on if it's not addressed.
Right, absolutely. So you see these issues that may happen with school friendships, but if they don't learn how to deal with it, or if it's not treated, or if parents aren't helping the child, the long-term effects are just huge in terms of if they go to college or trade school, as they have a relationship or get married or in the workplace, you're going to have all sorts of issues.
That impacts their life.
Forever. And kind of tying this in, obviously, good self-esteem is certainly a very important thing that we strive for in every child and every person. Why is this so important?
Well, when we feel good about ourselves, it helps us to be confident about who we are and what defines us. We become confident around other people at school, work, and socially. And that becomes framework for success. We've got everything in the foundations that are there, and we can springboard off it. And from that, self-esteem that's positive produces satisfying school experiences or career environments, healthy relationships, and in turn, happy, well-adjusted children who then turn into happy, independent adults.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say also that when people develop good esteem, have good self-esteem, that even it affects the people around them, just in terms of their general happiness when they go to the movies, to a sporting event, to a music festival, whatever it is. If someone is feeling better about themselves, they don't project that negativity on other people around them. So there are all sorts of kind of side effects as well. So as we talk about self-esteem, one major thing I'm sure all people, parents in school, employees and so forth that work with kids want to know is, what can you do? What can you do to help a child who suffers from low self-esteem? What are some recommendations you may have? I know we could probably talk hours about this, but what are just some general recommendations you may have?
Well, you're right. We can talk for hours on this, but there are a couple of things that parents can do. First of all, remember, Mike, that these children are children who usually have not experienced success. They are the ones that are constantly going to the pediatricians and the psychologists and to tutors and psychiatrists, and they haven't, as I said, experienced tangible success. So the first thing I could give to parents and to parents out there talking to you is to not fixate on the negative, but to look at ways that you can give your child positive reinforcement and encouragement. At school, one of the things you can do is collaborate with teachers or guidance counselors and ask if it's possible for your child to have a daily chore or a task that they can do that they're going to do successfully, whether it's being an office aide, a teacher assistant, anything that they can do that is just going to give them some positivity. It might even come in the form of a telephone call or a note, a positive reinforcement call, or a note telling the parent how well, or telling you how well your child's doing. This is something that could be celebrated at home, put onto the fridge with a magnet, because these invariably are things that your children have not experienced. As far as home is concerned, again, give specific praise and positive feedback, not purely for achievement or outcome, but rather on effort and improvement. That's what needs to be looked at, measuring effort and improvement. Look for ways to praise them. Not for breathing, obviously, but for tangible improvement. As long as your child is improving and doing better, that's what you should be looking for, because this is going to foster the encouragement for the child to be able to take on more tasks effectively and even to take positive, healthy risks. It just becomes a snowball effect. So the more that you can praise your child, encourage them, tell them how proud you are of them, the more that you are going to instill this self-esteem, which in turn is going to help them succeed on many, many levels in life.
Great. Thank you, Gary. A lot of great points. So self-esteem, certainly something that's very important in all ages. For today's talk, the importance with middle school students, high school students, elementary students, the importance of feeling good about yourself, having that good, healthy self-esteem, the importance of recognizing what low self-esteem is, to see what the signs are, the causes of it. And as Gary pointed out here the last few minutes, ways to help students who are suffering from low self-esteem, what they can do, what you can do to help them. I think it's also important for us to realize that every one of our kids and kids that we work with are just so important. They have their own set of unique abilities, and it's important to recognize that, to praise that, to help them to improve as a person, to develop as a person, and then, of course, to develop that healthy self-esteem that's going to carry them not only through school, but with friendships for the rest of their life. So we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.